Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We are waiting for the other panelists and speakers to join in as well, and we'll be starting in a few minutes. Good evening, everyone. So we are broadcasting live on YouTube as well right now. Good evening and welcome to the second episode of the Urbanlogue webinar series. My name is Venugopal and I will be your host on Zoom for today's session. So for the first episode, we had over 1,000 registrants from representing across 130 Indian cities and 20 international cities who joined us. And it's great to see that we have over 1,000 registrants even for today's session already. The format for today's discussion will be similar to the first episode that we had. It will be largely conversational, where we will be addressing the questions that you as participants have raised in your registration forms. We sincerely hope that you will find the session engaging and useful. With that, a few housekeeping quick rules. So to all the panelists and the participants, you can use the chat box below to interact with each other. Feel free to have conversations on the chat box. Participants, if you have a particular question that you would like to address to any of the speakers or panelists, kindly use the Q&A box that Zoom provides. And lastly, there is an option to upvote a particular question that someone else has raised as well. So panelists and participants, you can like the particular question so that it comes up on the list and it will be easier for our team to pick out the questions as well. For those of you who are listening in on YouTube as well, kindly drop in your questions on the comments box and our team will be taking the questions from there as well. On that note, I'd like to introduce our moderator and speaker for today's session, Ms. Ashwati Dilip. Ashwati is a senior program manager leading the Complete Streets policy, strategy, and on-ground implementation work at ITDP India program. She has been working with different stakeholders at the national, state, and city level on technical inputs for sustainable transportation projects. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Ashwati to take the session forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to join all of you for the second session of Urbanlogue, where we discuss together and learn from each other on creating COVID-safe mobility. We had a fantastic participation last week for the first webinar on COVID-safe public transportation, with more than 1,100 registrations and over 600 participants. Today, we've already had 1,000 participants, and I'm sure we have 1,000 people who have registered. And right now, if you would like to take a second to remind your friends and colleagues to join this webinar, please do so. We are live on YouTube. The mobility ecosystem is incomplete unless safe public transportation that we discussed last week is paired with safe walking and cycling facilities. In mid-April, the World Health Organization issued new technical guidelines on moving around during the COVID-19 outbreak. Whenever feasible, consider riding cycles or walking, they said. But how do we ensure that our streets and public spaces are safe for walking and cycling? This is the focus of today's discussion: instant street interventions to expand space for walking and cycling. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Smart Cities Mission for their continued support with this program, particularly Mr. Kunal Kumar, Mr. Rahul Kapoor, and the entire team who've been working very closely with us. We are also delighted to have the World Bank and GIZ Smart SUT as our knowledge partners. Jumping into the agenda for today. Today, we have with us a remarkable panel, and let me very quickly take you through our agenda. We have a short introduction by Mr. Kunal Kumar, Joint Secretary, the Smart Cities Mission, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, followed by 3 quick presentations to set the context. I will focus on the challenges that we face to create safe streets and the solutions that cities across the world are embracing. Next, Mr. J. Shravan Kumar, the Municipal Commissioner of Coimbatore, will take us through the process, the challenges, and the success of implementing tactical urbanism interventions in the city of Coimbatore. Finally, we have a presentation on the solutions embraced by the city of Berlin. We've been reading about it a lot, and today we're going to hear it from Mr. Peter Brotman from the Senate Department for Environment, Transport, and Climate Protection, Berlin. We also have a panel discussion, and on the panel, we have Ms. Nupur Gupta, Senior Transport Specialist from the World Bank, who will be sharing the role that the bank plans to embrace as it supports cities in this task. We also have Ms. Vijay Lakshmi, Managing Director, Hyderabad Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, who will be sharing Hyderabad's plans. And finally, we have Mr. Raj Cherubal, CEO, Chennai Smart City Limited, who will share with us Chennai's ambitious long-term vision to ensure safe and affordable access for all. Thank you, everyone, once again. And without keeping any of you waiting at all, Mr. Kunal Kumar, over to you, sir.
Ashwati, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're perfectly audible. We can hear you very well.
The reason is I am in office, and Government of India does not allow Zoom in government offices. So I've shifted to my mobile hotspot, and that's why I've kept my video off.
Sure.
And I hope I'll be able to carry through these 3-4 minutes of my talk without any hassles. If there is any, please raise your hand, and maybe I'll have to move to some other place, but it will take me 10 minutes or so.
We can hear you perfectly well, sir, so there's no problem at all.
Thank you so much. First of all, welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to have such an international audience, an audience from all cities who are queued up, an audience from various different organizations across the world who sense the importance of the subject that we are talking here. One of the things that I want to start with is something that we used to speak of very much in Pune, which is, the depth of democracy proportional to the width of the footpaths in your city. And this is something that was so stark and so shocking to hear, that people often used to come to terms with it over a period of time after going through a lot of thinking about it. But it does take time for people to realize the kind of importance that walking has in our cities. And if you read the book called Walkability by Jeff Speck, actually he makes so many points about how walkable cities are, not only economically more vibrant, people who walk actually eat more fresh food. There is a sort of correlation between the wellness of people and walkable cities. Of course, there's a the health aspect to this also. Plus, of course, I also remember another thing that I saw people talking about, and this book about Amsterdam cycling says, it says, look at cycling not as a sport, but as a transport. And from sport to transport is such a transformation, because you can do cycling once in a while as a sport, but if you convert that into a transport of a daily life, then it makes more sense not only to your own health but your city's health, and overall, the climate for everyone changes. And of course, in India already, I think 70% of mode of transportation is either walking, cycling, or NMT. It's like that. It's just that we need to make it more secure, more safe to cycle, more safe to walk. And that's not going to happen easily, because it's almost like a street fight going on the street. The car wants its own space. All kinds of public transport wants its own space. Private transport wants its own space, and there is a cyclist and a walker who is struggling amongst this kind of a street fight that is going on. Whereas that's not the case everywhere. If you see in Amsterdam, I think a cyclist can easily stop a car on the road and say, hey, it's none of your business to drive before I get to the other point. So it's actually, the cyclist has more power over the private motor vehicle in a city. It's a social choice. It's a society's choice as to what it needs to see itself going forward. And this choice is not driven by one individual or one organization or one SPV or one CEO. It has to be driven by the entire socio-political environment in the city, and what you want to see as a collective consciousness needs to develop amongst all stakeholders to make that happen. I think these kinds of dialogues that we're having on this webinar is very important in that respect. And we have an amazing panel. I think we would learn from best practices across the world as to how this has been done. In fact, the what probably is realized by everyone, and everyone realizes that promoting walking is important, cycling is important, non-motorized transport is important, and its implications on climate and all. I don't think we need to really delve on the importance of that, but it's about translation. It's about converting this understanding into action. It's about converting this understanding into step-by-step recipes as to how things can be done in cities. And by the way, these recipes cannot be general for everyone. A recipe in Amsterdam will be very different from a recipe in Delhi or a Chennai or a Bangalore. But the basic tenets remain the same. It's about how you connect to stakeholders, how you build the political environment around it, how do you actually construct the problem in a way that the social consciousness actually absorbs the importance of it, and how you actually start to take those initial steps, which probably we at some point call placemaking, the kind of stuff that was done in New York, tinkering with creating cycle lanes and then make them safe going forward. And how do you put your foot in the door and you start to actually expand it going forward? These are the things that we need to, learn from each other. And I think this is a great platform on which this thinking can actually evolve and, go, forward into action going forward. So I'll stop here and over to you back again, Ashwati. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words of inspiration. So I will also continue straight into our first presentation. Venu, if you could just... So today, the first presentation, as I mentioned, will focus on creating safe streets and public spaces, and particularly for all citizens, irrespective of income, age, gender, or physical ability. Next. So for a second, I actually request all of you to step back and imagine what will happen to our cities if we start using our streets as they were before. And what does this actually mean? 50% of trips in Indian cities are by walk or cycle. And another 20% of trips by public transportation also start and end by walk or cycle. So 70% of our trips, including walking or cycling on our streets. So if we don't act now, physical distancing will definitely become a challenge. Our streets may become hotspot for transmission, threatening a second wave of COVID-19. There could also be a possibility of increased congestion, and it may result in poor air quality, which will increase our risk to the current pandemic, but also to any future crisis. Further, it's very important for us to note that ensuring the safety of these modes will have a disproportionate impact on the mobility of women, elderly, children, and the economically weaker section. So what are the challenges that we need to tackle, and how are the cities across the world solving these puzzles? Today, in this presentation, we will focus on 4 important challenges. 1, our cities lack sufficient walking space, especially as we now try to maintain physical distancing and queue up in front of shops. Secondly, as public transportation restarts with reduced capacity, it is important for us to identify other alternate, affordable, and sustainable modes of transportation that we can and should promote. The fourth alternative can under no means be a shift to private motor vehicles, which will be unaffordable and inaccessible to large sections of the society, and also result in ensuring that the climate crisis comes even closer. Now, higher footfall zones like markets are also extremely vulnerable, and we should think about what we can do to ensure that they are safe. And finally, as all of us remain cocooned within the 4 walls of our house, it's extremely important to think about recreational spaces, because mental health has also been deteriorating in our cities. Cities from Paris to London and Berlin to Bogota and Mexico City are embracing quick, cost-effective techniques to ensure safe walking and cycling through extensive networks across entire cities. What are these cities doing? First, they are expanding footpaths by repurposing parking space and carriageway lanes on streets with high pedestrian footfall to ensure safe physical distancing. Next, on predominantly commercial streets where we need to queue up, that's an area where they are increasing their footpath space. And finally, around bus stops, bus terminals, and depots where users need to wait as wait for the bus as well as walk. In case of terminals and railway stations, access streets are also being pedestrianized or delineated as slow zones to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists. Next, these cities are promoting cycling as an alternative mode for short and medium trips to reduce the strain on public transportation. They are creating hundreds of kilometers of pop-up cycle lanes, identifying these networks along existing public transport networks on arterial and subarterial streets. On residential neighborhoods, they are delineating networks as slow zones with speeds as low as 15 kilometers per hour, where pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists share the road space. Along with creating cycling infrastructure, they are ensuring that everyone has access to cycles by expanding either their cycle sharing systems, cycle rental systems, or free cycle schemes. Further, they have declared cycle repair shops as essential services during the lockdown. Third, they are managing crowds in high footfall zones such as markets by decentralizing city level as well as local markets. This is being done by identifying commercial streets adjoining the market that can be temporarily pedestrianized or also on other streets. So here, the access to these streets are also being controlled. Finally, they are repurposing streets as social spaces through scheduled road closures using barricades and timed management of traffic flow. Now, Kerala recently notified that all Sundays would be full lockdown days where only walking and cycling would be allowed. They have, in fact, identified networks of streets in multiple cities where traffic would be shut down between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. to double up as recreational space. Now, as they focus on implementing these initiatives, political leadership in these cities, such as the Mayor of London or the Prime Minister of New Zealand, is also actively promoting these modes of transportation. They are, in fact, running communication and outreach programs where the weekly or daily timings of the intervention, rules of the road, modes of transport that is allowed on each of these streets, social distancing norms, and maps of similar interventions are all available around the city, either through static signages, posters, social media, surveys, and interactive maps. Summing up, these interventions will ensure safe and healthy commute for all our road users. They will provide an alternative and affordable mode of public transportation. We will have safe access to essentials, especially in crowded areas, and we will also have sound health and active social life. And what is very interesting that we've seen through this particular presentation is that they do not take years to implement, or they do not need high investment. But with the right political will, we can even start working on them and implementing them tomorrow. Thank you for listening in. And I would really like to take a moment to thank the core team that has worked on this research, including Aditi Subramaniam, Achutan, Bala Nagetran, and Parin Visaria, as well as the entire team at ITDP who reviewed this work and made this possible. So without keeping you waiting any longer, after setting this context, I would like to invite the Coimbatore Commissioner, Mr. J. Shravan Kumar, to share quick tactical urbanism interventions that he's implemented in Coimbatore, focusing on the process, the challenges that he faced, as well as share the story of success. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Ashwati, and all the panelists, including Mr. Kumar sir, Smart City Mission Director. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shravan Kumar, Commissioner, Coimbatore City Municipal Corporation and Managing Director, Smart City Limited. We, as a part of Smart City Limited, have experimented some interventions within the streets of Coimbatore to have it a safe and healthy mobility, including few interventions like tactical urbanism, wherein we actually plan to we have studied the technical aspects of the current usage of the public streets, and in the context of making it much safer. Already basic foundation context has been given by Ashwati, wherein she actually mentioned worldwide around 60% of the trips end with public transport, either by walking or by cycling or something of that other sort is being used. So within the Coimbatore city, I just like to give a small overview. It's a city with around 2 million population, wherein around 30 lakh trips are being made daily. Almost 60% of them are by public transport and using NMT. As per the census also, 2011, there were around 1 lakh cycles which are being used, but of late there have been a lot of consciousness about healthy mind and soul. So people are shifting to NMT based trips for at least shorter distances, or to access to the public transport, or from the public transport back to the home. So when such a study is being made, we as a part of Coimbatore Smart City have thought to implement a pan city based network, wherein we actually analyzed the streets which are crowded, how to make smaller interventions so that it can be much more safer and beneficial, especially in the longer run. And of late, this initiative has been taken just before COVID, and unfortunately, after this COVID, still safer public transport as well as social distancing has become a new norm. So, in this context, we have actually planned for 30-kilometer eco mobility corridor with exclusive benefits like all the cycling and this EPDM based footpath, wherein while accessing also all the children and all can use it well. We have planned for around 7 kilometers of complete model streets, model roads, 3 of them, and entire stretch of 300 kilometers within the city for complete NMT corridor, wherein we propose to come up with this complete cycling, dedicated cycling lane. So this would be benefiting around 1 million population per se. Next slide, Venu. Venu, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So what is tactical? As in tactical, by default, we can say something which is first as a trial or a temporary thing which we have implemented, and then based upon participation and user feedback, then it can be modified and rectified accordingly and to make permanent. Why actually such an event should be done? I'll just list out few advantages of the same. Because it's a temporary one, it can be done overnight or within a day or two, as already Ashwati said. Like once you have the commitment, you engage all the stakeholders, you have discussions with them, you just discuss how is the existing scenario and how your interventions are going to lead to a better and safer movement of the public by and large. So why it is needed should be explained to the stakeholders, and it complete streaks being a new concept actually while implementing also within Coimbatore city. We have faced many hiccups in the initial days. Shopkeepers were apprehensive, but of late they realized that when such interventions really mattered a lot, they were like welcoming it. So where it actually needs, actually such an intervention should be done in a crowded area or commercial hub of the city, wherein there are high volume of pedestrians or bus users or public transport users. Because of late, once they get down from the bus, they distribute to these crowded areas wherein there are older markets or the traditional city, which you say, which has historic importances, wherein there is varied kind of land use, wherein there is density is also high. There are hawkers, street vendors, all things taken into consideration. It is better advised that crowdier or the central district part of the city be taken upon priority to do such an intervention. Also, if such an intervention is made in such portion of the city, it will have visibility, as in more number of users, more access, more good feel, and that's how a city spirit grows up. So this is what is tactical event. And how we, as I already mentioned, primary, we have to do the site review, do all the service using all the traffic maps and all time-based traffic maps. Traffic at what time is being used up to, as in when there is the school hours are there, a lot of school children would be moving. So safer crossages and zebra crossings and all should be properly maintained. And evening, once they are back to their buses, again there will be a lot of children who are moving around. As well as the traffic service needs to be done, and the concept once it is done, it has to be explained to all the stakeholders involved, including shopkeepers, the ones who are on the streets visiting, as well as the street vendors and all. We have successfully coordinated with all the concerned departments as well, the highways, as well as traffic police and other departments who are working there, including our municipality staff. We also have ensured safety measures for the volunteers who are guiding the new users. They have to be like volunteering, and they have to be explaining the citizens of how things are coming up. And this installation we have done for 2 weeks. We have got feedback from each and everyone, from child to a older user, old person. We have gotten what they have felt, and then we are now planning it to take it forward for a permanent thing. If it has been a good welcome measure by each one of the citizens who are using it. You can see it in the upcoming video. Next segment. Venu, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, if you can see, initially the footpaths were very new, but we have initiated the plan wherein around once we studied, it was around only 10% of the initial area was used by pedestrians. We have increased it to 34%. Even the bus corridor was shrinked so that buses would be streamlined into a single corridor. There are safer pedestrian crossings which were made. All by doing such interventions, the level of service has jumped in from level D to level B, which in fact is a very good uplift. From after this tactical event, we have now planned in this year to make it a permanent thing, and it is much mandate after this corona pandemic has been outspread. We have identified stretches, and we have allocated a budget of around 4.5 crores to come up with this project. Tender process has already been initiated. What would be done on these safer streets needs to be highlighted a bit. Actually, by and large, all of us have a perception that the wider the street, the road, the better it is used. But ideally, it's not true. Our behavior becomes haphazard even if a lot of space is given. As in, a bus needs only a single line of space, and it would be very much streamlined if it actually adheres to that particular line. But we think that 1.5 times the road would make the traffic more easier, or the flow would be easier, but it's not so, is what is a big lesson which we have learned from such interventions when such studies are made. Ideally, traffic flow should be continuous at a constant pace and in a streamlined manner. This is what we have learned from such an intervention. And proper prioritization needs to be given to the users, as in when major segment of the users are being pedestrians, are the ones moving by cycles or by walk. They are contributing to the larger chunk, and they need to be given prioritized more. So the space which needs to be given for them should be more as compared to the four-wheeler or two-wheeler, whichever is moving on the road, or the bigger buses. So once these interventions are made, we have experienced that everyone stick down to their own particular zones. And in fact, our overall volume of movement of traffic was much smoother and much streamlined when compared to the earlier scenario. Next slide. Yeah, if you can see in the left picture, left side, these coloring is being done, wherein initially the buses were moving in a very haphazard manner, and once this coloring was being made, the buses have actually started moving in the bus lanes, and extra space has been given for the pedestrians as well as persons alighting from the bus. So this is what we have done, which you can see on the left side. And the right side would be how we are doing it permanently. It is being done in many European countries as well, wherein green belt is shifted much towards the center median. A lot of space is given to the hawkers as well as the users who are using the pathways. So that is how overall improvement in the look, feel, and usage is actually coming to the complete streets. I urge other cities also to make such tactical events initially, and then based upon the user feedback and stakeholders response, we can finally come up with something permanent. Next slide. So how is it actually useful in this current COVID scenario needs to be highlighted. Now, as we already know, each one of us know, social distancing is the new norm, and you have to somehow ensure life still goes on as smooth as earlier, because everything is intertwined with each other, as an economy is intertwined with the transport, and all people who are mobile are basically somehow catering to their daily codes, or going to the work or something of that sort. So it's highly important that safety measures on all the footpaths, retail and market areas are being focused upon, especially parking spaces, schools and hospitals. Somehow when normalcy is restored, and when we all are aware that COVID is there along together and we have to somehow manage with that, our lifestyle needs to be adjusted accordingly, wherein social distancing where there are many interventions like making all these smaller boxes in front of shops and all, but especially in such streets, you have to crowded streets, you have to provide more and more space for them to go ahead with. They need to be properly uh, educated regarding each one of us. Even though we know to get into our regular routine, our education should be properly given. So all IEC kind of campaigns should be made, and such interventions which are temporary should be made permanent in the entire streets. So taking up such interventions at multiple locations in the city will actually enhance the community participation and can also be embedded in the long-term plans. You want to make it close faster? So initially there were challenges, but later on everyone welcomed this measure, and now I urge each one of the city to do joint planning with all the stakeholders, do proper do proper surveys and get proper feedback, so that our cities are made much safer. Thank you. These are the images wherein how the existing scenario is being given on the left side. This is how we are developing it. So you can see it, it's evident right away.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your plans for Coimbatore. And having heard from you and being inspired about the pilots that a city like Coimbatore has executed, and also about your next set of ideas and plans as well, I think we are now ready to listen to the story of citywide interventions from Berlin. Peter Brotman, thank you so much for joining us under such a short notice. Over to you.
So, thank you. Can everybody see my presentation and you can hear me well, I hope? Okay, that's nice. So, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the nice speeches before, especially for the praise of walking. My name is Peter Breutmann, and I'm working in Berlin in a coordination office cycling. So I'm not focused on walking, even though it's a big topic here in Berlin. This you can see here is a nice, wonderful and photoshopped picture of the wonderful city of Berlin. Just some figures: we have 3.6 million inhabitants, and that's the biggest city in Germany and the capital of Germany. And we have about 18% of modal share for cycling already, and it's raising like 1 or 2% every year. So we already have a development towards cycling, and it's on a political and on an administrative level, it's very much promoted. So I will show you now some pictures. I decided not to go into the technical details. I will give you a link with technical details later if you're interested, but I want to show you some pictures on infrastructure, on what we see as infrastructure that promotes cycling. And next slide, here it is. This is a lane, it's called Hasenheide. It's one of the smaller major lanes in the city center of Berlin. And this is the first protected bike lane that we implemented about, I guess, 3 years ago. We have a very unique Mobility Act, a law which forces us to build bike lanes on every major street in Berlin. And this is a model that we have. This is like the first of its kind. It's a protected bike lane, protected with these bollards. They are made out of steel and they are protecting the bike lane and so the cyclists from cars. We have a big problem here, not only here, but I guess all over the world, with illegally parked cars on cycle lanes and illegally used cycle lanes by cars. So we have to protect them physically so that it's very comfortable and it's safe for people to cycle, especially for those who are not very keen in cycling, who are like beginners and who just want to cycle and just starting. So this is a model of an infrastructure that we want to have and that we are forced by law to have on every major street here in the city of Berlin. But the situation, like in reality, looks mainly different. I will show you the next picture. This is the Coimbatore Dam. I took this photo last year in summer for another presentation, and it shows you exactly the problem that we have on still most of the streets here in the city. We have here a 3-lane major street, 3 lanes in each direction. On the right side, you got parking cars, permanently parked cars. In the middle lane, you can see here is an illegally parked cars in the second lane, and cyclists, like here this, I would say, a mother with her boy, are forced to pass by the illegally parked cars and get endangered by here the Porsche who comes from behind. This is not an attractive infrastructure for cyclists. This is not an infrastructure that attracts people to choose a bicycle as their mode of transportation instead of like the car. So what's the problem? We have a law. We have money in our pockets to build the bike lanes because they're not so expensive actually, but still we got problems on an administrative level. It's not easy to build bike lanes like in thousands of kilometers overnight. You have to have a lot of participation, extensive planning, etc. And we were thinking a lot about that. How can we make these processes faster? How can we build more bicycle infrastructure? If it's not the political will, that's the problem, and not the money. It's question of processes within the administration and a very extensive idea of planning and participation. So then COVID-19 came and we were forced to build a proper bicycle infrastructure within weeks because our public transport, which had a modal shift of more than 50%, just dropped down. They had a 70 to 80% decrease. And we said, okay, if all those people will take their car instead of public transport, the whole city will crash, the traffic, the mobility system will crash entirely. So we were forced to build a proper bicycle infrastructure within weeks. And the other thing was, due to COVID-19, the distance regulations. Also, people walking, people cycling had to keep distance from each other. So we needed more space for them. And I will show you in the next slide a picture of this exact road, just some 100 meters down the road, which we rebuilt. And this is exactly the same road. I took this picture one day after we installed those measurements, and you can see clearly that the acceptance is from day one great. Even a girl here with inline skates, legally she's not allowed to go there, but never mind. Even a girl with the inline skates chooses this path, which was horrible to go by before, now as her way, because it connects two very important points in the city. What we did is we just took the measures of construction sites. You know, these flexible bollards, they're just put there, they're not screwed into the surface of the road. The yellow lines signalize that there's a temporary measure. They are just, you know, glued there. You can remove them easily if you want to. And for this street, 3.5 kilometers, both directions, it took us just one day to finish it. And the whole process, the whole project took us about less than 2 weeks. I guess it was 10 or 12 days from the very idea and the decision, yes, we have to do it, till the day I took this photo. And all in all, in the district, mainly in the district of Kreuzberg, which is a very central district in Berlin, we built in this way about 20 kilometers of these bike lanes, and only on really busy and great roads. I will show you another picture. This is a Hallische Ufer, same region. It was a 3-lane road, 3 fast lanes for cars, driven speed around, I would guess, 80 kilometers per hour. And I went there on a Sunday after we installed it and said, I want to show how it is accepted. And the first picture I could take with those 2 boys, about whatever, 10 years or less, cycling there alone without their parents. And I thought, well, that's crazy. That's so great. They're kids cycling down this road, which was before kind of an autobahn, which is 3 fast lanes. And now we were just reallocating space. And the result is that we give it, that really people accepted kids cycle there. It was great. It made a big impression on me. And we see on these roads and more people realize, okay, I can now cycle there. I do not have to go, this way. I have a straight way now on a safe road. Temporary measures, as I told you, but we will make them permanent within the year. And those pop-up bike lanes definitely won't go away. This is a temporary measure, but a permanent reallocation of space for better use of transport within or in the city of Berlin. I was asked to talk 6 minutes. Now it's a bit more, so I will try to finish a bit faster. This are 2 links. I would ask the presenter to send the links to the chat or in a documentation. This is first of all a guide to temporary bike lanes, which is written by a Dutch Dutch firm. Mobicon is it called. They put down all the technical measures, they wrote down the process, they explain how we did it like in detail. And the second one is a personal gallery I made from it with photos from the bike lanes and the construction sites, etc. In case you want to publish anything about it, they're free under Creative Commons license. So I say thank you. Hope I gave you a small impression. This says Danke. It's German for thank you. And this is a sign put down by some cycling activists or neighbors combined with some balloons on one of our bollards. And this shows you very clearly how big the political profit was, because I would say 90% of all reactions were very positive. People were saying, thank you, finally, here is a bike lane. And even though we took away about 200 parking spots on this street only, there was hardly any complaint. I would say 90%, as I said, were positive of all reactions. And there's a big political gain that we have here, and especially a big gain for the city itself. Thank you. Danke.
Thank you, Peter, for your inspiring presentation from Berlin. I hope all of you are inspired by the 3 presentations that you all have seen today. And maybe some of you even already have thoughts on how to implement them in your own cities. We have seen that cities across the world have turned this health crisis into an opportunity to promote resilient and reliable modes of transportation, such as walking and cycling. We are now moving into the panel discussion. And I'd like to request the panelists to keep the answers short, because we're getting, we have more than 600 participants who are also waiting to ask you a few questions. So I'll keep the panel discussion short and get straight to the point. And I request all of you all to keep the replies brief as well. So first, I'd like to invite Ms. Vijay Lakshmi, the Managing Director of Hyderabad UMTA. Ma'am, could you please share your reflections on the presentations that you've seen right now, and also highlight what are the steps that Hyderabad is planning to take in order to ensure safe access as we ease our lockdown in the city? Yes, over to you.
Thank you, Ashita. Greetings to all. And at the outset, I would like to congratulate Smart City Mission and all the knowledge partners for organizing such a wonderful webinars. They're very thought-provoking and giving a lot of insights how to handle the situation in various cities. And a lot of appreciations to the Berlin speaker and also Coimbatore commissioner for doing wonderful work there. And it has really given us insight, because we are just thinking how to start it in Hyderabad. Actually, we have plans in place, but this is giving me a lot of ideas. So, and what was your second question, Ashwita?
Ma'am, I was asking you that what is Hyderabad's plans right now? Like, do you all have any plans right now as you're looking at, easing the lockdown? So that was my question.
Yeah, just before answering that, I would like to give a brief background about Hyderabad. Hyderabad is a major metropolis which has around 7,500 square kilometer of area with a population of 10.8 million, which is expected to go to 19 million in 2041. So a lot of demand is there, travel demand is there. And right now, if you see the model share, it is 30% of the trips are by non-motorized transport. So earlier in 1980s, it was 40%. It has drastically come down to 28%. And now the people are from bicycles are getting promoted to two-wheelers. So with the result, actually, once this lockdown is relaxed, what we have seen is with no public transport, what we have observed is lot of two-wheelers are coming out who otherwise would have gone to public transport. Metro is in operational in Hyderabad. They would have parked their two-wheelers and taken the metro. So with the result, there is a lot of two-wheelers, which is a 42% in Hyderabad. Okay, and the private mode is 10%. The cars are 10%. All these have come onto the road. So we have some plans developed as a part of a comprehensive transportation study, and we have immediate plans, medium-term plans, and the long-term plans. So COVID, I personally feel the COVID impact will be short-term, maybe maximum to 2 years, but then we should see this NMT as a not only immediate term, and as well it should be blended into the long-term plans. So that is what we are at present. So we have immediately, to answer your question in short, around 120 kilometers of network we are planning for cycling, as well as improving the footpaths of equal amount.
Thank you so much for your reply, ma'am. Next, over to you, Raj, as the CEO of the Smart Cities Mission. So, Vijayalakshmi, ma'am, very nicely she put it that these interventions may be quick and temporary interventions, but what we actually required is a longer-term vision to sort of for our cities to embrace walking and cycling. So, could you share the steps that Chennai is embracing towards a long-term vision to promote walking and cycling? How can we make these temporary interventions permanent? Over to you, Raj.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks so much. This is a very timely seminar. I think one of the fears, I'm sure all of us, the elephant in the room is that, people are already talking about how everybody should be buying their own car because that's the only way to distance themselves and so on. Some of it is real. Some of it is probably will die down after the pandemic we go back to normal, but we cannot be complacent. Luckily for us, thanks to the smart city projects, thanks to organizations like ITTP and so on, and very importantly, the enthusiasm of the Corporation of Chennai, I think we have built on the success that we've had in the past 2-3 years. For example, the plaza has been a big hit. Cycle sharing, surprisingly for a hot, humid city like Chennai, is actually very, very popular. And even now I'm surprised that it's so popular because most of us probably were very skeptical. So a lot of good signs out there that if we do the right thing as a city, there's enough people enough citizens to support. So based on that, I think we are using the lockdown to prepare our DPRs for some absolutely mega projects. One is a JICA funded intelligent transport system project, which involves traffic automation and so on, and a very big MTC, the bus company piece to it. I won't get into a detail, but these are very, very big pan city projects, very badly needed because as you know, there is the carrot and the stick, and we always talk about the carrot side, the cycle track and so on. But I'll talk about the stick, which is obviously very, very important in India, across the world. And as the Berlin presentation showed, even in a well-governed city with relatively very few cars on the road, with a massive network of public transport, the presenter was talking about how people park on the footpath, for example. I'll get to that. But so the ITS is one major project, which I think became a smart city project mainly because of the successes of the other projects. So the government felt it was confident enough to give this to us to deliver, and it's going on pretty well. The consultants are pretty good. The other major project, which the Corporation Commissioner is a huge champion of it, is how do we build on the success of the plaza and replicate it across the city? So we are taken up around 100 and some kilometers, 6 packages where all the things that we've talked about in the last probably 10, 12, 15 years, not only footpaths, but also landscaping, creating public space, child-friendly networks in those neighborhoods and so on. All these issues have been taken up, and as we speak, the surveys have started. 6 different set of consultants are going to work on it. Massive project, which obviously involves coordination with the ITS project, the Metro Rail project, and so on. These are some of the projects, but also, for example, we are just starting what could be one of the large value capture projects. So there is a huge property in the north of Chennai called Broadway. It's a gigantic bus depot. The report is almost complete to look into how do we do a PPP project so that we can bring in CapEx and OpEx money to the city, but also put better use for that land, create a very good bus depot connected to the nearby metro station, and the airspace is used for other multifunctional businesses and so on. So these are some very, very strategic projects. But since some very influential people are here, Kunal and others are here, so I think it is a time for us to think, how do we go from tactical to more strategic? Because what happens is that we indulge a lot of, very importantly, in tactical projects, because that's how we convince the public, convince each other that these things are practical. It's one thing to see a color picture from an advanced city where they've done a great work. It's another amazing thing to see something like in Coimbatore, where people are actually enjoying something that came out of a tactical urbanism project, and Chennai IDDP has done many of those things. But here are the two stumbling blocks I think we need to pay special attention. One is parking. No matter what footpath you build, no matter what cycle track you do, there'll always be somebody who will come and park the car on the footpath, because that's how it is. Because we don't have any parking management system. We don't treat parking as a commodity. It is not priced. So why not, park anywhere you want. Nobody's going to touch you, kind of system exists today. Luckily, after a lot of headache, Chennai is actually implementing a massive smart parking project. We have just started, and proof is in the pudding. And wherever we have implemented that, you can see some amount of discipline happening, a lot of negotiation with car owners, shopkeepers, citizens happening. And in general, I'm surprised that public is very willing to accept a project like that, if they're convinced that it will bring some order and discipline to the city. But it's easier said than done. The scaling of it is absolutely going to be very important. Luckily, the Tamil Nadu government, various branches are very, very keen to have this in place. Very important. That's one piece. But the other unsaid piece we never discuss is vendors. And I'm a very, very pro vendor, street vendor guy. I mean, so, yeah, but the problem is, many people would see street vending as somebody who occupies the footpath, occupies, say, the future cycle tracks, for example.
Yeah.
Because just like parking, we have never taken vending as part of our urban planning. We talk about it a lot in different seminars. Either you're very pro vendor or very anti vendor. But the point is, not only is it a gigantic economic activity, it's probably, somebody told me, it's bigger than all the IT companies put together. The vending, if you look at from a monetary point of view, it generates jobs. Especially in a COVID-like situation where the economy is in trouble, vending is absolutely important to generate jobs and livelihood. But from this context of walkability and so on, unless we make it a very, very formal system to manage vending in a very, very formal way, we're going to go back to square one. Cars will be parked on the footpath, vendors will be sitting on the footpath.
So we'll definitely come back to you on that one, Raj, because you are tackling that upfront. Now, coming to you, Kunal Kumar, sir, so yesterday I actually read an article where a superintendent engineer from one of the cities mentioned that they're actually looking to the national government for guidance on promoting walking and cycling during this particular period. And also, we've been reading that the New Zealand government has become one of the first country to provide funding to make tactical urbanism interventions. And in fact, they've actually got ahead with an official national government policy. And cities are now being invited to bid for this funding from New Zealand's Innovating Streets for People Fund, which where 90% of the funding would be used to widen sidewalks and carve out temporary cycleways. So, sir, the question to you is that, could you please share with us what are the steps or nudges that we can expect from the mission to help our cities take the right actions? So we have heard about the fact that Raj was saying that we should take these, more longer term interventions, but even for like large scale city-wide temporary interventions, what are the steps or nudges that we can expect from the mission? Over to you, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I think, as Raj said, no better way to learn than by actually doing it. And within the Smart Cities mission, thankfully that creativity has been built in the mission design that cities can actually start to experiment. And when you say tactical urbanism, two fundamentals of tactical urbanism are: one, that it has to be low cost, and two, I think it has to be quick. So I think these agile interventions, which we sometimes call placemaking and some other names are also given to it, are essentially built into the design of the smart cities mission. So cities are, we promote cities to actually take up those initiatives. Number two, what we do as guidelines is not something that we do from in Delhi to other cities, but we learn from what's happening in tactical urbanism and such projects and learning by doing in cities, and we try to gather all that into bits and pieces that we learn from cities into guidelines. And we have, in fact, with ITDP also done policy workbooks, we've done complete street guidelines, and we've actually given it back to the ecosystem, created by their own efforts and actually given back to them. Third, I think, we look at peer-to-peer learning. So I think one of the mechanisms that this webinar you can clearly see is an attempt in the direction where we try to link the practitioners and people who understand this ecosystem to talk to each other. Then these ideas spark in different places, and people take up those efforts because the enabling environment is already there under the smart cities mission. The fourth is, of course, about case studies, and I think case studies not about what's but how's. It's more important to discuss how things are done rather than only talk about what has been done in which other place. And I think there are some commonalities which we need to share in the Indian context. Political economy needs to be relevant to the planning needs of our city, just like he was saying, Raj was saying about vendors and about parking. So we need to be very, very specific to local context, and therefore case studies on how this was done in an Indian context or Indian city and spread among other cities is going to be very important. We also, look at awards. A couple of years we have been giving awards to best projects within, placemaking and complete streets, and we will further take that agenda forward. And awards is not only to recognize someone who has done well, but also to kind of bring that effort onto the national agenda and say that this is something that the entire country is aspiring for. So I think those are my points. We will look at what you talked about in the New Zealand context, and let us see if we can come out with something like that. But within the smart cities mission, with the amount of money that we have, we probably may not need a separate fund. We may even think of that. But I think there's immense amount of creativity and scope that is built into the mission, and the amount of money that is built into the mission in even today make these things possible. And I would urge all my commissioners, all CEOs who are on this call, and all practitioners who are working with them to make this a reality. This is the time that you need to push the pedal and see that all these things that are now built into the mission, nobody is stopping you from doing these things. It's only our imagination which can actually be the biggest stumbling block. So imagine a city that is of this kind and build that imagination among your stakeholders, take them along and create that consciousness, which will actually make these things happen in our cities. That's, I think, how we have to move forward.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for those insights, and also for inspiring all the cities to use the Smart Cities Fund for these interventions as well. We would look forward to also sharing some, if there are cities that have tested it out in the next few months, then we could also have learning between them as well. Thank you for that. Now, again, from Kunal Kumar and Raj, who were talking about how you can actually move from these tactical urbanism interventions into permanent interventions. The next question is to Nupur Gupta from the World Bank. So, we've been speaking so much about tactical urbanism interventions, Nupur, and they are definitely low cost. But as we were doing some citywide walking and cycling plans in Tamil Nadu, we noticed that most of the primary networks for walking and cycling would at least be about 50 kilometers. And, as Raj discussed, there's a need for us to, when we want to encourage walking or cycling in the longer term, we will have to make these interventions permanent. And from Berlin, we heard Peter saying that in a year's time, this intervention is going to become permanent. So my question to you is, Nupur, that as a representative of the World Bank, how are you planning to fund and promote walking and cycling projects in Indian cities in the longer run? Over to you, Nupur.
Thank you, Aswati. First of all, big thanks to the Smart Cities Mission and Mr. Kunal Kumar and his team for this leadership in launching the webinar series on COVID and urban mobility. This is hugely required given the unusual times that we are in. And of course, thanks are due to ITDP as well for turning this idea around so quickly. And we are really very happy to be associated with this exercise, this very valuable exercise. Coming to the question, Aswati, if I can just, of course, the bank is invested in more than funding in pushing the ideas of sustainable urban mobility. Wherever we do projects, whether in India or across the globe, our effort is to make sure these are integrated interventions, whether it's a public transport intervention or it's an NMT intervention, that we ensure safety, integration, NMT within that. So just to give you some examples, with the Sustainable Urban Transport Project, which closed a year ago, more than a year ago, we had Naya Raipur, where we helped them with the BRT Lite, and a large part of it was to improve, the NMT and cycling infrastructure. About 33 kilometers of that got built in Naya Raipur, and it was easy to do because, the traffic had not emerged by then. The same is true for Hubli Dharwar, where we invested not only in the bus rapid transit system, but also the NMT ecosystem. And then finally, Mysore public bike sharing, which is probably the first citywide bike sharing successful system in an Indian city. And so on and so forth. I mean, we have many examples from China and Latin America of NMT interventions as well as public transport. Coming to the COVID NMT opportunity, right? I mean, I think this is, just to put it in perspective, this is a great opportunity that COVID, despite its many other not so positive aspects, has thrown up to the cities and urban mobility fraternity, right? You have a situation where public transport now comes with a high risk tag and is seriously constrained in terms of capacity, right? We are not going to be able to give more than 50% of that public transport capacity for commuters. Now, public transport by any stretch is really, one of the main forms of transport for large groups of people in cities. In Indian cities, you showed 21, some figures say 25% is the public transport mode share. It is a significant mode share. And as the gentleman from Berlin also pointed out, they suddenly realized that they would have half the capacity and they needed to do something for the remaining half, right? What can the Indian cities do for the remaining half that now have to be accommodated? I mean, these and also, the global experience is showing us very clearly that people are preferring in these times individual modes of transport, right? It's either personal modes if you own them, or it's NMT, which is wonderful. Whether it's Latin America or China, we've seen Europe, we've seen large increases in the use of cycle, of walking, which means people see that as a safer and viable option. And if we are in a situation where we have to ensure that the cities keep moving, right? I mean, we want economic recovery. We want the growth engine to move. And if public transport is constrained, this is the opportunity that has been given to explore other safer options, which is NMT. And so by doing this, you achieve 3-4 things very quickly, right? You are assured against overcrowding in public transport, which can make it even more unsafe. You're assured that people will not quickly transition or get pushed into using personal modes. You give a chance to giving a safer option to commuters. And finally, you are investing in a temporary opportunity today to be able to leverage it in the longer term. So what I see now, and this is why this is so pertinent in the India context, is that, we've done some surveys in 2013-14, and it showed that from the profile, and these were 12 cities in India of public transport users, the profile showed that 1/3 the public transport users did not own any kind of vehicle, right? 30% of them owned cycles, and 50% had access to some kind of a motorized vehicle, right? And this ownership was at the household level, which means that it's not clear that the public transport user had access to that mode. So to my mind, in the India context, exploring the NMT opportunity is not just an opportunity, but perhaps an imperative as well, right? We have to offer to this captive population who does not have other alternatives. And in the meantime, make sure that those that do have alternatives are also looking at this and invest in a longer term opportunity, right?
Sure.
How can we invest in making this permanent? I think first we have to invest through these temporary. Why is temporary important today? Because we are in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
Traffic has disappeared, and we have the opportunity to take that street space when traffic is, our streets are not, there aren't traffic jams and snarls. We take that space when we want to offer that safe mobility. So, this is the time to be doing it.
Sure.
Low cost, you don't want to start planning and saying, okay, I will do the construction. I mean, a lot of smart cities have NMT plans, and they were in the process of launching them, right? But we don't have the time of 1 year or 2 years to build those NMT plans.
Definitely.
And we need to action this and provide that opportunity now. And as Berlin found, that people actually liked it, right? I mean, as other cities found that people really liked the cycling and walking facilities that were created for them. And once you have that public opinion in your favor, it changes also the political opinion, and you can move towards permanence very quickly, right? No one is saying that, just do this for 14 days and get, that's it. It's not, but the money will come. I mean, I think there are so many agencies, including, the national and state governments, which are waking up to this, this huge opportunity. Once you can showcase that this is really a viable, sustainable mobility option, right? The monies will flow. I mean, the bank is there. There are several other multilateral banks. There are bilateral agencies, all of them wedded to the sustainability agenda. So I don't see that funding being necessarily the constraint. I think first we have to show. And Coimbatore, I think, in many ways has shown that to us. We have Berlin examples, and we have Milan examples, etc., etc. But we have our very own Indian examples. And I think that is the, that's what starts people thinking, hey, Bogota did 35 kilometers overnight of temporary bike lanes, right? Are we saying that, even if we take a week or to do that, and if we can create suddenly safe mobility, alternative safe mobility for people, then, let's try that. There is nothing to lose. And if we are saying it'll cost, like you said, between 6 lakhs to 15 lakhs, depending on what quality you want per kilometer, that's not a whole lot. And the Smart Cities mission, Mr. Kunal Kumar is saying, I don't have a problem with you piloting things through the Smart City mission. So there's, effectively really no issue. We are there to support not only for the funding, but also the knowledge and the technical support, right? So we are fully invested in pushing this opportunity, because we think this can be a big one for India. This can change and repurpose things the way mobility is.
Sure, Nupur. Thank you so much for that, for your insights. And because we're running low on time and we do need to speak to our panelists, we have to our participants. I'm just going to jump into some of the questions from the participants to our panelists. So I'm going to take one from Chetan Sodia, who has a question for you, Peter. And he asks, saying that regarding Berlin, were there any backlash or disagreements from cycle community, from local communities, whom we mean car supporters, when these interventions were being constructed during this particular period. And we also have a follow-up question from Eliana Silva, who asked, how was the participatory process for the temporary interventions? Like, did you need to do them right now? Because you had mentioned about how you had an extensive administrative process that did require you to have a participative process, although we did see the Danke cards. So yeah, over to you, Peter, on that front.
So if I got the questions right, the first one was about the backslash one. You said the car community, and the second was about participation of neighbors and communities. Yeah. Let's start with the participation process. We have, as I told you, we have a mobility law, the Mobility Act, which tells us, which makes it basically illegal to have no cycling infrastructure on a main road. And this law was clearly, like in general, participated. It was by the Berlin government. There is, I guess, there is no need for the participation for every single road when it comes to the question whether or not we build a bicycle infrastructure there. Sure, we have to talk to communities, we have to talk to neighborhoods, but there's a different value, which is road safety. We are talking about road safety measures here. If I have a 3-lane road where a cyclist can legally ride, we as an administration have to make sure that he can ride there in a safe manner. So the question that comes to participation is, in our opinion, not whether there will be a bicycle lane or not, but maybe whatever design elements or when or which will be prioritized or whatever, but not the yes or no question. The second problem we have with participation in general is that those who participate in those processes, when we communicate with neighborhoods, are mostly not those who use the cycle path afterwards, but those who live there and think this is my parking spot in front of my door and I don't pay a penny for it. So what we see in when we have some events for bigger infrastructure projects in the case of cycling, we see people coming there for 20 parking spots, and we have 200 people sitting there and say, "That's my parking spot," and every day my car parks there, and we say, "Oh, this can't work out because it's just 20 parking spots." Who does not come there are those thousands of people who can later use this bike path on the daily mobility ways when they go to wherever they go, sport, work, children, kindergarten, whatever. So we have a problem with participation on this level. Still, we talk to the neighborhoods, we communicate with the communities who live around, and with civil society. We have a great civil society organizations here to promote cycling. We do not expect any backslash, because some of you, I don't know who it was, maybe Kuna said, we have a war going on, cars versus bikes on this in the street. I don't think that's true. Basically, it's cars versus all the rest, including cars. The main problem for cars is that there are too many of them on the streets. They want to park where they park somewhere where the car driver wants to park his car. There are too many causing traffic jam. You know this saying, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. So yeah. What we see is that the car is not the winner of the crisis, as a lot of newspapers write that the car is a winner of the crisis. If that means that we have a double amount of cars in the city, the first loser of the crisis next to climate and blah, 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 is the car itself, because it's just stuck all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't paint this picture of the car versus the bike, and I do not expect a backslash, because even the car drivers, they do not want more cars in the city. That's the difference to cyclists. They want more cyclists. So, so I guess I put both answers together: participation and the question whether there will be a backslash from the
Thank you so
cartoon.
much, Peter, for that answer. And on this note, actually, I'd like to let all our participants know that we at ITDP India program, we're actually conducting a digital survey in Indian cities to understand how travel choices of people might change after the lockdown is shifted. And the findings of these surveys can actually inform public investment and policy decisions. So we will be sharing the link with you in our follow-up email tomorrow to you with all the presentations. Please do share your feedback and make your voice count. Now, jumping very quickly because we are at 4:15, I'm just saying that let's just extend this to about another 15 minutes because we still have a very large participant group who's looking here. So let me just ask a question to the Coimbatore Commissioner. So we had a question where, the question was that as Coimbatore plans to scale up these initiatives, especially with this particular pandemic as well, some of our major streets like the Avinashi Road, for example, belongs to the highways. So if we wanted to create a network of walking and cycling network, which will allow people to move from one place to the other, how do you plan to work with stakeholders such as the highways? Over to you, sir.
Regarding involvement of stakeholders, especially as mentioned, highways being a government department, we do have a coordination with them on different various other projects as well. So I don't think there would be any objection from highways per se, because it's taken up under smart city mission and all. Generally, objection would be especially in the, as I already mentioned, like in central business district, where there is like smaller place, as in few square feet actually matter a lot, either for the street vendor or the small shop keeper or people belonging to that smaller category, wherein they feel that business might be affected if space is lost. It is a pleasant surprise to us, because after that study which we have done, once this tactical event is being in place, it's other way around than what was expected. In fact, initially the guy or the people who were in fact opposing the project or somehow hindering them have somehow realized that it has added up to his advantage, and people actually try to be there for certain time to actually like enjoy the feel of it or the benefit of being a wider space. They turned out to be positive, and they actually acted as torch bearers or front runners in telling others. So it's always by word of mouth wherein it is being planned. And in the city of Coimbatore, this 40 kilometers which we have planned under smart cities in the ABD area, which is covering all the lakes. So we have a chain of 9 lakes. Major theme of Coimbatore smart city is lake rejuvenation and redevelopment. So all the lakes being interlinked, we have somehow identified 40 kilometers of the stretch, so that bicycle rider will also have a good experience wherein he traverses closer to the nature rather than traveling on a higher pacer Avinashi Road or the major highway. So
Sure.
In step-by-step mode, we want to actually take it to the people, the idea of NMT, because it's very much well implemented in European countries like Germany and all. So once city gets a feel of it, then everyone would be watching for, and then it would make our things easier to implement in other areas as well.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much. So going to the next question, this is from Nashwa Naushad, and she asked that, this is to you, Vijay Lakshmi ma'am. She asked that street interventions depend on coming together of many stakeholders, and not every city has a functional UMTA. But you, as the lead of, as someone who's leading the UMTA at Hyderabad, I just wanted to know if you had some advice for the other cities about how can these cities quickly get buy-in from these different stakeholders, even if they do not have an UMTA in place. What might be your pointers for them to actually start work?
Actually, it's a very valid question. See, we have many challenges when we have to implement this NMT system. system. Safety is a major concern. Like other speakers said, then the right of way, there is no exclusive right of way. There is no continuity, and multiplicity of agencies is the main issue. Because, for example, in Hyderabad, we have Hyderabad Metropolitan Development Area, Development Authority, and Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation is there, and Hyderabad Growth Corridor Limited, and Hyderabad Road Development Corporation. So many PWD is there, and then NHAI, who are into construction and maintenance of roads. So actually, there is no standardization also. So people have different right of ways, different cross sections, and there is not enough provision for an empty right of way. So a task, in my opinion, if there is no UMTA, if UMTA is there, UMTA will standardize and provide all the requirements to all the stakeholders. It should be mandatory for them to follow these cross sections, so that we don't have conflict between the other road users and the NMT users. That is one important point. And in Hyderabad, there is a working group which was established in 2013 with all the agencies concerned, but nothing happened so far. Still lot of work to be done. So we have some kind of a task force in smaller cities.
Sure.
Which can plan into go into detail, and there should be an empty policy for each city or each state, and
Sure.
it should go proper order, and then we can implement this. This is what I feel. There should be some kind of a institutional framework or a task force for this.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you, ma'am. So there are some interesting questions, and Nupur, we've been having these conversations, so I'm going to direct them to you. Though it's not, I'm sure any of us can answer these questions. So Arun Tangaraj, he says that is cycling a mode of transportation that would be feasible in a hot and tropical climate like India? And would not low-speed electric vehicles be a better alternative? And there's also a question that Megha Naidu is asking, where she says, would female population, find it difficult to ride a cycle? And how can that be tackled in a large scale? And so I was just thinking that, since you've also worked on the Mysore cycle sharing system, if there are some stories of success that you could actually share. Over to you, Nupur.
Yeah, thanks, Aswati. Very good questions, and I think we encounter them quite frequently. The weather is a constraint, no doubt about it. But I think we have to stop and say, okay, so is our weather very different from, or is Singapore's weather very different from ours, right? And do people walk and cycle there? And I would say yes, right? And if you went to Europe or to North America and you saw the walking and cycling, even in sub-zero temperatures, including Canada, you would wonder why they did it, right? So I think the bigger issue that we are faced with in Indian cities is the lack of priority that we are giving to cycling, and that in a nutshell means that it's an unsafe environment, right? Let's first fix that unsafe environment to see how many people would still want to, cycle and ride. But I think, yes, I think we need to do more, right? We having shades, thinking of the convenience of the rider, because it is an uncomfortable climate. And yes, perhaps facilitating it through e-bikes, etc., could be considered, so that riding in hot sunny weather is not as taxing as it would otherwise be with a regular cycle. So we have to look at a range of options, and we have to also see the target audience, right? Is it the car user that we are attracting? Is it the captive public transport user or a cyclist who doesn't have options, right? And we will probably have to look at a range of options across that. And we must start looking very seriously at, the convenience of the cyclist, which I think we have not thought about. It's not, just that, where would I park, right? If I had my cycle, are there safe parking facilities or spaces for my cycling? I mean, a lot of things will roll out, and we have to think those things through. But I don't think they are necessarily very expensive or difficult to galvanize once we start thinking that way. On women, yes, I think it's been noted that fewer women use cycles. Even in the Mysore experience, we noticed that the proportion of women using the cycling, bike sharing was much lower than men. And I think we need to look at that more closely, whether it is there, whether it's there, the female labor participation in the workforce, that is the issue, whether it is the inconvenience of cycling and clothing that is the issue. There may be a number of issues, but we have to think those through. Typically what happens is that, men, for a variety of social and other reasons, get priority in terms of whatever vehicle the household owns or otherwise, right?
Yes. Yes.
Or even the resources that are available to rent cycles, etc.
Yes.
So I mean, there are so many things that play out into this. I mean, the Bihar scheme of giving girls cycles and how enrollment rates just jumped up, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know whether clothing had much to do there.
Yes.
And similarly in Tamil Nadu, I believe they have a similar scheme. We have to look at these on how, and if the government were to think about giving a cycling subsidy, right, to women or students or whatever, I think, we would see that transformation.
Sure.
We have to fix the safety part and the other aspects that you're talking about.
Yes, definitely.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you for that. These are our last few minutes, but we have quite a few people who are asking us this question to you, Peter. If you could just speak a little more about the mobility law that you were speaking about, and also about how is it that you work with narrow streets where there isn't enough space, and how would you navigate what are the solutions for narrow streets as well, but more importantly about the mobility law that you were talking about.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The mobility law is something very special that we have here because it was basically enforced by a people's referendum back in 2015-16. There was a large group of people, observing the cycling policies here, and politics were saying all the time, yeah, we have to promote cycling, we will build cycle tracks, etc., but there was nothing happening, and there was a large group of people organizing themselves as a civil movement, collecting signatures, about 100,000 in a couple of weeks, and they were forcing within a period of election campaign to the politics to implement such a cycling law. And then they were lucky that there was a Green Party was in charge for the mobility sector, etc. So we have this regulatory basis. But I also say it's the only city in Germany that has this basis. But I also say you do not need it. It makes things easier from time to time in some discussions when it comes to certain streets. But you do not need this to promote cycling. It's a mobility law. It's just, it has a part about pedestrians, it has a part about cycling, a part about public transport, but the cycling part is basically the innovation part, and it was the starting point. And there is a regulation, I told you, that we have to build cycle tracks on all major streets, but there are a lot of more things in it. And also we need a net of streets, especially narrow streets and smaller streets. We will not build cycle paths in narrow streets. We have to have different solutions for narrow streets, which are basically residential areas. We have to focus the traffic, and in this case I mean car traffic, on the wider streets, on the major streets, and we have to build the narrow streets in a way that the cars that drives there are residents or people who want to go there. This passing through traffic through narrow streets, residential streets, we have to avoid it in a physical manner, which means we have to put bollards on a street, we have to make one-way streets, etc. So that we can build a network of cycling paths without building physical cycle infrastructure in the narrow streets. The second thing is, we are not at that point, but my personal opinion is we also have to close streets, certain streets for cars. The network we have for traffic, for car traffic, is very dense. And the most valuable thing that we own as a city is space. And the most inefficient way to use the space is to use it for cars parking there. And the second most inefficient way is to use it for cars going there, with one person sitting in it. 1.2 is the average. So if our streets get denser and denser. We have to reallocate space. And that means, in my personal opinion, that we also have to decide whether every street is still accessible for cars. But this is a really hard struggle. It's a fight that we still fight, even though it's maybe in some ways easier because we have a different approach to cycling in some European cities, not in all of them. It's still a big fight because still people want their parking spot, want to go, they love their cars, they buy these really expensive things and they want to use it, they want to show it. So, and we influence the daily behavior by reducing their space. And this is a fight we have to fight for every square meter in the city.
It's a fantastic. So we are at 4:30, and I don't think we could have had, and more a fantastic way to close this session. So Peter, you said that we should close certain streets from traffic, and the most inefficient way to use our streets are either for parking, which is number one, and then using the cars there as being number two. So I'd like to close this session with a quote that Shreya actually recently shared with all of us. It's a quote by Gary Hamel, and he says, "Why are we so often satisfied with the best practice when we should in fact be inventing bold new practices?" And as Peter mentioned, we should probably be closing networks of streets within our city to create an equally dense network for walking and cycling. For a start, we should definitely be looking at hundreds of kilometers of tactical urbanism interventions to promote and encourage walking and cycling. So I hope all of you all were inspired by today's discussion. And I'd like to really thank our participants who, participated in such huge numbers and stayed through an entire 1.5-hour session, as well as each and every speaker and panelists and all of you all for taking so much of time and being with us on this interactive session. Thank you, everybody. I really hope today's discussion will help each of us leap from best practices of a few kilometers of pilots into inventing whole new practices of citywide interventions. And I'd also like to take just a second to thank once again the Smart Cities mission, as well as our knowledge partners World Bank and GIZ Smart SUT, and also the entire team at ITDP India program who've been helping with the Urbanlogue series as well. Just a second to name them: Venugopal, Kavin, Aishwarya, Shrishti, Keshav, Aditi, Shiva, who's been getting us a lot of speakers, and finally Shreya, who's been advising and leading us from France. So thank you so much, everyone, and over to you, Venugopal.
Thank you so much, Ashwati. Without further ado, to all the panelists and participants, like the last episode, it will be great if you can share your feedback through the poll that you would see on your screen right now. It will help us in refining the episodes that we'll be part of going ahead. So this is our next webinar, which is on the 3rd of June, which coincides with the World Cycling Day. And the link for registering for this has been shared already in the chat thread, and we are resharing that right now. So for those of you who would want to block the time right away, please use the registration form to register right away. So we'll be sharing the highlights of this session, including the presentations, the videos, etc., to all the registrants, and will be shared on the social media platforms as well. Stay tuned for more updates. Stay healthy, stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, zack, Peter Breutmann.